To this now, the collapse of the South African Airways Takatso Consortium deal has been widely welcomed. Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan yesterday revealing that the over 3-year-long talks to sell a 51% stake in the financially troubled airline collapsed. Let's try and get some understanding now from some of the people who were part of this deal initially, and we are joined by Gidon Novick, and he is from Global Aviation. Mr. Novick, good evening to you, and thank you for your time. First, let's get your thoughts on the collapse of this SAA-Takatso deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pity. We were involved quite a way back from the inception of the deal, which is actually over 3 years ago. It seemed like a really good idea to get experienced industry people into SAA, raise some external capital and, really achieve two things. One was, really stop this ongoing process of taxpayers funding the airline, which, went on for 10 or 15 years, which accumulated losses of somewhere around 50 billion rand. So, there was a real opportunity to stem that tide. And then I think on the upside, there was an opportunity to really create a entity, a commercial enterprise, a brand that South Africans would become very proud of. So, we were quite appealed to, it was very appealing for us to get involved. It, didn't turn out that way. We left the consortium about a year ago. And, I hope it's just, doesn't stop creative thinking around how to make state assets work, how to bring in professional, experienced management teams, and how to generate profits rather than losses in the businesses.
Let me take you back, Gidon, because to your knowledge, as someone who was initially part of this deal, or this consortium, to your knowledge, was affordability ever an issue for Takatso for it to become a majority shareholder of SAA?
Well, our job when we were involved in the consortium was to bring the skills. There was a capital partner whose job it was to raise the funding. So we were, it was not for us to do that. I mean, we thought that actually less funding was required, that if the business plan is more conservative and that the business is run professionally, it doesn't have to chew through billions of capital. With Lift, for example, we started up with much less capital, a very small amount relative to the billions that are talked about in the SAA scenario. And that's the way we would have approached it, is just, conservatively, and, you don't have to grow all at once. You can grow conservatively and slowly and in a measured kind of way. So I guess it's a different approach, but the funding was never our responsibility.
To your knowledge, who was the capital funder of the deal?
Well, Harith was the partner in the deal. It was ourselves and Harith. Again, us being the technical partner and them being the funding partner.
Yeah. And I'm asking this question, Gidon, based on a quote in the Sunday Times this week. The Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, quoted as saying, and I want to use his exact words, "We would need proof of funds. That's our condition to release further funding to SAA, proof of funds from the equity partner." So that appears to be the very thing. I'm trying not to use the words like that's what broke the camel's back, but that indeed seems to have been the very issue that collapsed this deal. That's why I'm asking about the funding issues here, whether or not due diligence was indeed conducted to understand whether this equity partner, this private equity partner, could indeed afford this deal.
Yeah, no, it's a good question to ask. I don't know the answer. All I can tell you is that airlines should not chew through billions of rands. They should be, the business model should be profitable. It should be conservative. And I guess the one thing that is encouraging to me coming out of the statement that was made yesterday by government was that there'll be no further funding for SAA by taxpayers in the future. Now, we know that that promise has been made previously and broken, but it has been made again, and I think we can all just hope that that promise is kept, that in whatever format SAA ends up, whether it's government-owned or whether they relook at privatization at some point in the future, it is the end of the road for taxpayers having to foot the bill.
Yeah. The minister announcing this collapse between SAA and Takatso, Pravin Gordhan talking about state assets not being undervalued. Do you believe that this deal massively undervalued SAA's assets?
Well, it's interesting. I'm not a corporate finance expert, but my understanding of valuation of an entity is, what is the future income that it will generate? What is the future potential discounted back to the present? And so much of that depends on the business plan, but more importantly, who's going to run it? What is the level of experience and expertise of the management team? And that ultimately, in most businesses, certainly in my experience, determines the financial outcome and ultimately the valuation. So that's, that would be a very wide range depending on what the decision is. If it's, the decision is, well, let's continue to run it inefficiently, without proper accountability, then it's going to be worth very little, if anything at all. But if it's run properly and professionally and conservatively, it can be worth a hell of a lot.
Yeah. I want to, as we taper down this conversation, Gidon, I want to give you a sense of yet another reaction to this collapsed deal from someone who was the accounting officer at the Department of Public Enterprises. He was interviewed on this channel last night, and his name is Kgatatso Tlaguti. He had these words to say. I just want for us to listen quickly before you respond.
Sure.
So many lies have been told between the beginning of 2021 to today to try to sustain what was always an illogical transaction. You try to attach, to say that the asset is worth, you can sell it 51 rand, when you have assets of anywhere between 10 to 15 billion rands in the business. You have a strategic partner that is preferred, who comes on late into the game, and no proper due diligence has never been done on that particular entity to ensure that they have the funds to consummate the transaction. So there was always, a lot of red flags that should have been heeded by both Minister Gordhan and Cabinet on this transaction. You had a clear case of the assets of the state being deliberately undervalued to take the value out of the state and let it accrue to an oligarch who was chosen by the minister. That is corruption right there. Minister educated us quite well with regard to state capture. This is exactly corruption through state capture that we had on our hands here. And really the authorities must come to the party.
So a number of issues spring up there, Gidon, and I'm quite interested in the last one, because he says this was an oligarch chosen by the minister, and it then moves us to this question about whether or not state assets were undervalued in order for this airline to be sold cheaply to someone that he names as an oligarch of the minister.
Yeah, I don't know who that is. I'd be interested to know who that is. But, listen, I think any asset that gets sold, I mean, firstly, the one thing which you haven't mentioned but is related is that any transaction that's done, and this is a personal view, with regards to state assets, should be made public straight away. I mean, what is there to hide if you're selling a state asset, which is really an asset that belongs to the people of South Africa? That transaction and the details of that transaction should be exposed. Which, by the way, is something that when we were involved, we were absolutely insistent on, and we're not successful in getting that across the line. So that was one of the reasons we pulled out, because there's no reason for secrecy. I think on valuation, there's what I spoke about, which is the future potential of the business. I think that's really the heart of valuing a business or a company, and SAA in this case.
Yeah.
And then there are assets in the company which also need to be valued. But there's ways of dealing with that. Again, I'm not the expert, but there's all sorts of structures where the existing owner could get some kind of a preferential benefit of existing assets.
Sure.
So I think there's ways of dealing with it. We were not involved, so I don't know what the ultimate transaction looked like. But to me, I think to not lose the picture, the big picture is, and not just relating to SAA, because I think SAA is relatively small, is to identify areas within government, state-owned enterprises that are a massive drain on the fiscus, not only financially, but they're not delivering on their mandate to their customers. And therein lies a huge opportunity to bring in the skills. The skills exist here in South Africa. You've got people that want to be involved. I personally wanted to get involved in this scenario, add my skills as well as the skills of my team and the people around me, and create value for the country as a whole. And that I hope, that opportunity I hope is not missed in the future, just because this particular transaction has not succeeded.
Sure. Gidon, I'm completely out of time. Do you know anything about the 51 Rand nominal fee that has always been speculated to be the amount that SAA was sold for?
No, but what I would urge you to do is get a hold of the purchase agreement that was on the table. I mean, that should be scrutinized properly, even though it didn't go ahead.
All right.
I would get hold of that, and then you'll find all those answers.
Gidon Novick, thank you very much for your time. He used to be part of this consortium at the start of it, but as you've heard him say, they later pulled out. He is with Global Aviation and to the DPE. If you feel that some things were said on this show that you don't agree with, you're welcome to contact us. It's an open platform.